In the heart of a rural American town known as Salisbury, nestled within the dreams and legends of old, stood an ancient house. Cloaked by time, its silhouette cast an ominous shadow over the otherwise peaceful hamlet, creating an unnerving comparison of life and the dark unknown. Townsfolk seldom wandered near it, reluctant to touch upon its chilling history. It was within this grim environment that a young woman named Nina decided to reside. Nina was a city girl at heart, her life a panorama of hustle and speed, contrasting with her new residence's unsettling tranquility. Her wide, emerald green eyes wrapped in curiosity, with the courage to dive into the depths of the unknown on her own. The explorer inside her saw the potential for adventure in the hushed whispers of the house's eerie tales. So, despite the tales of a monstrous entity haunting the house, she decided to move in, eager to stamp out the fear-mongering tales of the locals. The day she moved was gloomy, the sky heavy with hushed promises of a storm. Clouds clustered into ominous formations, blotting out the late afternoon sun. Undeterred, Nina entered the house with a feigned confidence. The first thing that hit her was the scent, an odd blend of damp wood, stale air, and a hint of something indescribably sinister. The peeling paint of the hallway, once perhaps a warm, friendly color, was now a gruesome gray. Long, thick cobwebs adorned the corners while the floorboards creaked in protest with every step. Despite the exterior's frail condition, the interior was relatively intact. The grand wooden staircase, the heart of the house, spiraled upwards into the veiled darkness. A haunting silence blanketed the house, disrupted only by the sporadic whimpers of the ancient timberwork. As Nina observed her eerie surroundings, she almost laughed at the superstitious whispers. Noting the decay and abandonment, she compared the pitiful building to the monstrous tales that revolved around it. Little did she know that she had just checked into a perpetual nightmare, a decision that she would come to regret in the forthcoming days. By her second day in the grim house, Nina found herself leaning more towards excitement than fear. She woke to the eerie quiet caressing the house, interrupted only by the erratic patter of rain against the weary window panes. The heavy drapes did little to restrict the morning light that seeped through small cracks, projecting bizarre shapes on the worn-out wallpaper. With the break of day came growing curiosity. She moved from one room to another, exploring the house inch by inch. Each room in the house was a story of its own, a chapter frozen in time. The house showed signs of hurried abandonment. The paintings were hung crooked, the furniture covered in thick layers of dust, and personal items strewn about recklessly. In the late morning, she discovered a locked door at the end of a long hallway on the ground floor. The door, unlike others, was intimidatingly large and in an odd state of preservation. The dark wood retained its polish, and the large iron lock with intricate designs seemed oddly out of place with the rest of the forlorn dwelling. Nina felt a chill whip through her, and a sense of apprehension washed over her. But the allure was irresistible, and the adventurer inside her egged her on. She searched meticulously throughout the house until she found an oxidized iron key, concealed within the depths of a neglected drawer. She couldn't help but hold her breath as she slipped the key into the lock, the old metal groaning in protest. Then came the sense of satisfaction as the lock gave in with a click, permitting her entry into the untouched chamber. Descending a narrow flight of stairs, Nina suddenly felt a drop in temperature. Clearly unvisited for years, the basement was a time capsule. Dust particles danced in the beams of light that penetrated the opaque windows, casting insidious shadows on the damp brick walls. The area was crowded with boxes, forgotten and forsaken, piled high against the walls. However, it wasn't the dust or the cluttered space that unsettled her but rather the eccentric paraphernalia she discovered there. Mysterious drawings, inscriptions, and strange artifacts were strewn across a broad wooden table. There were convoluted symbols that appeared to originate from occult practices. Among them lay a chilling number of bone fragments, disarranged and crudely carved with the same unintelligible signs. Nina's initial rush of excitement gradually gave way to a seed of terror. The basement did not house the benign remnants of history she had expected to discover but held traces of unintelligible rituals and ominous practices. The staunch realist in her dismissed these artifacts as modest displays of superstitious beliefs of the bygone era people. Yet, deep within her, a disquiet was born, the echo of folk tales gaining a hush of truth. Cold dread curled around her gut, gnawing at her confidence. Had she just unlocked herself into a world of shadows and dread that the local myths whispered of? Little did she know that the answer would soon present itself in the most harrowing form. No sooner had Nina explored the strange relics in the basement, the house began to reveal its hidden layers of darkness. Inexplicable shadows formed at the corners of her vision, whispers echoed in the hollow darkness, and a cold chill seemed to fill the air, especially around the basement door. Each silent witness to the house's dark past was now a thorn, pricking against Nina's initial debonair. Yet she was not a person to easily succumb to fear. Instead, she decided to confront it and explore the strange phenomena. One evening, as the sun sunk below the horizon, drenching everything into an intense darkness, Nina experienced the most eerie incident. As she entered the hallway, she heard a hollow knock on the wooden door of the basement. Startled, she halted in her steps. The rhythm of knocks grew intense and desperate. It was as if someone was trapped inside, pounding on the door from the other side to be freed. The hair at the back of her neck rose, her skin getting goosebumps. She clutched the brass knob of the door tightly, flinging it open. The hallway echoed with the single note of its creak, but all that greeted her was darkness, an abyss of cold silence and apprehensive nothingness. The days followed with inexplicable incidents, sobs echoing in seemingly empty rooms, her possessions being found in the places she hadn't visited, and strange symbols appearing on the mirrors and windows. It seemed to Nina as if her connection with the physical world was starting to blur, and she was being drawn into another realm. Nina tried to apply logic and debunk the occurrences, only to find that they didn't fit into any scientific understanding she possessed. Even more troubling was the house's strange influence on her dreams, transforming them into a carnival of horrors, leaving her rattled and questioning her own sanity. Suddenly, life within the ancient house started feeling less like a home and more like a prison. She attempted to reach out to people, but it seemed as if the house had enveloped her in a bubble of isolation. Her calls dropped, text messages disappeared into the ether, and even mail services seemed curiously rerouted. In the following frantic days, she even tried to leave the house, but every time she attempted, she'd inexplicably find herself back inside. It looked like the house had decided to keep its latest tenant. And the chilling truth finally dawned upon her with the basement's opening. She had not only opened a door within the house but also a door to the other world, unshackling the entity that rested within, binding her to an unimaginable terror. Her skeptical dismissal of the local myths had trapped her in a relentless nightmare, from which escape seemed inconceivable. Realizing she was trapped within the confines of the house, Nina knew she needed to delve deeper into its shadowy past to discover a way to break free. The objects in the basement, with their eerie inscriptions, seemed to be the calling cards from the past. She decided to embrace the spine-chilling terror and embarked on a quest to decipher the symbols, hoping they held the key to her liberation. With the help of online archives, ancient scriptures, and late-night calls to anthropology professors, Nina started translating the cryptic symbols etched onto the bone fragments and other artifacts. After countless nights of relentless effort, she managed to loosely translate a few phrases. Bound in darkness, the eternal dweller, and freedom in light. The translations opened up a backbone-chilling narrative of the past, of the very land where the house stood. It appeared that the location of the house was once a site of occult rituals, where a malignant entity had been summoned and bound within the homestead, never to escape into the world. As she immersed herself in this gruesome history, the poltergeist's disturbances grew fervent and aggressive. The drowsy whispers turned into tormenting screams, objects flew around inexplicably, and the temperature dropped even further. Intuitively, Nina discerned a connection between the unrest of the entity and her pursuit of freedom. It seemed that the entity was sensitive to Nina's intentions and her efforts to break free. She soon realized that every step she made toward unveiling the truth was also a step towards escalating the entity's wrath. And so began an eerie dance, a delicate balance of discovery and survival. However, Nina remained undeterred by the growing paranormal disturbances. With her revelation of the entity's confinement, she was now closer to understanding its motives. This entity was no random poltergeist. It was a revenant from the past, trapped within the house for centuries. The entity was not just frightening her, but it was shouting at her, asserting its existence, a prisoner yearning for release. Freedom in light. The phrase echoed continuously in her mind. Nina conjectured that it was not merely a descriptor, but also an instruction, some kind of remedy to break the bond between the house and the entity. She steered her focus towards this phrase, hopeful that she might unravel the secret to setting both her and the entity free. But little did she know, the path to liberation was far more twisted and fraught with peril than she had anticipated. Following the cryptic cue, freedom in light, Nina decided she must confront the entity in a direct plea for answers. She dared to communicate with the entity, hoping to better understand its motives and the conditions for its release. However, deciding the best method to communicate proved difficult. Traditional efforts, such as speaking directly into the chilling silence of the haunted house, induced no response. The entity seemed to manifest only in ways that brought dread. With no other options, Nina turned to the occult practices used by the original inhabitants of the land. She undertook rigorous study, learning about seances and different rituals to interact with spirits. Though her logical mind recoiled at the idea, she was left with no choice but to traverse this dangerous path. One evening, in her living room shrouded in flickering candlelight, she began her first seance. She followed the rituals meticulously, her heart pounding against her chest like a terrified bird. The room began to grow colder, an indication of the entity's presence. In the chilling silence amplified by her expectation, she laid out her plea. I understand your entrapment, and I mean no harm. I request your guidance to the path of our mutual freedom, towards the light. What followed defied the realms of everyday reality. The candles flickered violently. A gust of cold wind swept across the room, followed by a deafening silence. Then, abruptly, a burst of blinding light shot from the basement door, followed by a soft whisper that echoed around. Seek beneath day. This cryptic response took Nina by surprise. Seek beneath day? What could that possibly mean? The answer was not as clear as she'd hoped, but it was a lead. She was certain of one thing: it had to do with the basement, the heart of darkness within the house. The weeks that followed were the hardest. Embarking on her cryptic quest, she searched beneath every artifact during the daytime, hoping to find a clue. Her quest led her to revisit every item she had cataloged, exploring the depths of the basement in every way possible during the daylight hours. Her body ached with physical exertion, and her mind swirled with confusion and fear, but perseverance propelled her forward. After days of relentless search, her efforts bore unexpected fruit. While moving a particularly heavy statue during the day, she stumbled upon a concealed section of the basement. It was a small alcove, within it a hidden scroll and a peculiar stone with a hollow in which one could possibly place a candle. On the scroll were inscribed symbols similar to those she had seen on other objects, but of particular note was an image of a sun. An understanding began to dawn upon Nina. Beneath the day, bathing in the light, she needed to place the candle in the strange stone and light it during daytime, in the secrecy of the hidden alcove. Potentially, the light the entity was referring to was not metaphorical but literal sunlight. However, it wasn't simply the light. It was the combination of daylight and the ritualistic illumination of fire, a beacon built of both the natural and the supernaturally revered light. The next day, filled with apprehensive hope, she followed her understanding. As the rays of the early morning sun poured into the basement, she lit the candle in the stone and placed it in the nook. As the flame flickered, casting haunting shadows, an intense shaft of daylight focused on the stone. The basement, formerly an abyss of darkness, lit up in a way it never had. To Nina's astonishment, the house responded. The perpetual cold abated. The whispering ceased. The entity reacted to the proceedings, though not with its usual wrath. Instead, Nina felt a sense of relief wash over her, a stillness that she had not lived in since the opening of the locked basement door. The haunting was retreating. Right there, bathed in a perfect balance of sunlight and flame, Nina had possibly discovered the key to the freedom in light, the method to dispel the darkness of the house and satisfy the entity's wish for release. Her relief, however, was short-lived as she realized the enormity of the task that lay ahead. The relentless haunting by the entity could finally be nearing its end. But what dangers lay in directly confronting and attempting to release a force powerful enough to hold her, and itself, captive? Only time would reveal the answers she sought. With the newfound realization of how to achieve freedom in light, Nina faced the daunting task of completing the release. It was a delicate operation, involving a volatile entity that could retaliate if provoked. She could not afford missteps. Her freedom and the safety of anyone who might reside in this house in the future depended on her next actions. She began her day with an intense meditation, trying to calm her nerves and gather strength for the task at hand. The house was eerily calm, almost as if it was holding its breath in anticipation. A sense of determined resolve settled upon her. This was it. She would either become the mistress of her fate or fall prey to the circumstances that had trapped her. Treading lightly, Nina descended into the basement, armed with the peculiar stone and a candle. The air was no longer chill, and oddly enough, there was a warmth in the gloomy depths, a welcoming familiarity. Placing the stone in its alcove, she carefully arranged it to catch the light streaming in. The golden sun rays flooded the stone, basking in its glow. As she meticulously placed the candle within the hollow of the stone and struck a match, the world seemed to hold its breath. As the flame came to life, a hum arose in the house, like a distant echo or a far-off hymn. Displaced shadows danced across the basement walls as Nina stood resolute. She issued her plea to the entity in a firm and clear voice. "I seek your release. I offer you the light that binds you. Be free and set us free." The room filled with a pulsating energy, an ethereal light filling the void from candle and sunbeam alike. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the floors, walls, and air. It was as if the house itself was groaning, straining against unseen chains. Then, all of a sudden, it stopped. The quiet was deafening. The light in the basement seemed brighter, the air fresher, the gloom lifted. The oppressive presence was gone. Nina felt an unbearable weight lift off her. The house, for the first time, felt like a house, nothing more. Trickles of relief and victory surged through Nina's body, but with it came an acute sense of exhaustion. The adrenaline that had propelled her through the confrontation ebbed, replaced by sheer fatigue of the recently lifted emotional strain. But she had done it. She had finally liberated the house from its haunting past and, consequently, herself from the dreadful possession. Gathering her strength, she ascended the stairs from the basement. The house seemed different, welcoming in its familiarity yet holding a strange newness. The oppressive gloom, which she had associated with the house since her arrival, was entirely gone. Now it seemed like any other house, waiting to be made a home. That evening, Nina slept peacefully for the first time in ages. The whispers didn't bother her, the temperature didn't drop inexplicably, and objects stayed where they were supposed to. She began repairing the house, fixing years of neglect and damage. But more importantly, she started healing from the incident that had cost her several sleepless nights and terrifying experiences. Eventually, Nina would go on to document her encounter with the entity, the historical revelations, and how she diffused the hauntings. Her notes would serve multiple purposes: a personal memoir, a guide to anyone who might encounter something similar, and a testimony to the presence of the otherworldly. The once feared house became her haven. In the effort to free it from the entity, Nina found her purpose. She lived a life of tranquility and continued her research into other reported hauntings. A life that once seemed compromised by an ominous entity became an extraordinary journey into the unexplored echelons of the supernatural. Flush with her hard-fought victory, she discovered an inner strength she hadn't reckoned with before. Not only had she defined her own freedom, but embraced the incredible journey her life had become. Life after the entity was drastically different. Nina savored the tranquility of her reclaimed home, barely recognizing it as the haunted monstrosity it once was. It wasn't just the physical space that had dramatically changed. Nina herself had transformed in the process. The once skeptic historian had become a seasoned, albeit reluctant, paranormal investigator. Despite the horrific experiences, she felt a growing fascination towards the supernatural, a certain gravitas pulling her deeper into its uncharted depths. Nina had also found herself a new life purpose: to demystify such otherworldly phenomena using her historian's methodology and her newfound spiritual understanding. In the following months, she converted part of her house into a home office, with walls lined by books pertaining to both recorded history and the arcane, standing side by side. Every day, she'd dig deeper, reading and making notes, cross-referencing, always seeking to make connections that no one had seen before. As word spread of her successful interaction with the entity that had haunted her home, sensationalized through the town's grapevine, others reached out to her for help. Everyday individuals and fellow academics alike contacted Nina with tales and incidents that they believed to have a spectral hand behind them. Her journey from an unwitting victim to an adept in paranormal activity had begun. Each case was unique, an unnerving narrative in its own right. However, instead of allowing trepidation to rule her as it once had, Nina armed herself with knowledge, grounding, and an iron will. The more cases she worked on, the more sophisticated her problem-solving approach became. A perfect blend of science and spirituality, tangible fact and intuition, Nina's method set her apart and above the myriads of amateur paranormal investigators. It was during this period she encountered another profound phenomenon: mediumship. While investigating a peculiar case in the neighboring county involving a recurrent spirit manifestation, she met Eliza, an acclaimed psychic medium known for her remarkable ability to communicate with spiritual entities. The wisdom and insights that Eliza offered opened up entirely new dimensions for Nina, pouring fresh perspectives to her understanding of the spectral world. Learning and absorbing this knowledge, she pondered on her experiences. In retrospect, she realized that her encounter with the entity in her house was more than a ghastly chapter in her life. It was perhaps a confrontation orchestrated by fate, leading her into an untapped realm of awareness about the coexistence of the living and the non-living. Meanwhile, Eliza, recognizing a keen intellect and openness in Nina, offered to mentor her. Accepting the offer, Nina traversed the spiritual path under Eliza's guidance, which not only honed her problem-solving method but also allowed her to refine her sensitivity towards spirits. This partnership ended up being mutually beneficial. While Eliza instilled techniques to exercise caution, control, and empathy towards the entities, Nina brought a methodical and academic approach to the spirit interactions that day by day seemed less eccentric and more a part of everyday reality. It didn't take long for word to spread about Nina. The woman who had once quietly moved into her town's most notorious house was now a beacon for those plagued with the unexplainable and the unseen. However, gaining a reputation also meant drawing unwanted attention. Nina's quiet life had now started to echo with the whispers of many, disparate voices carrying their tales of mystical encounters. The first case that surfaced from these myriad contacts was a chilling situation that struck close to home. A 2-century-old public library in her town needed her assistance. Users of the library and the staff had started to report inexplicable happenings. Books would fall off shelves, pages would turn on their own, and some members even swore they heard whispers when no one else was around. With Eliza alongside her for support in this new undertaking, Nina stepped into the library one early morning. The edifice, older than most of the buildings in the area, carried an air of grandeur and solemnity that libraries often possess. But beneath that heavy silence, Nina felt an undercurrent that hinted at something amiss. The duo started their investigation by walking through the library, feeling for residual energies and cold spots, signs of spiritual activity. The library, busy during the day with readers, was eerily silent during after hours, and it seemed to respond to their presence, a slight vibration in the air, like a single note resonating from a grand, unseen piano. Their greatest breakthrough came when they started investigating the library's history. Discovering that the library was built on the site of a long-dismantled orphanage, Nina couldn't help but wonder if the spirits haunting the space were the unsettled souls of these lost children. This theory was further bolstered when the library curator, a kind but frazzled woman named Clara, mentioned that the spectral whispers often sounded like children playing. Guided by this information, Nina planned, for the first time, a séance inside the library, the heart of spiritual communication. Even the skeptics in town couldn't ignore the transformative spectacle of light, sound, and undeniable emotion that night. As Eliza helped Nina reach out to the spirits, they heard stories from beyond, tales of joy, of sorrow, of longing from children who had lived and died more than 2 centuries ago. Nina discovered that the spirit children clung to the books and stories found in the library as those brought them the joy and imagination they might have missed in life. Making peace with this, she suggested the library be kept open for some hours in the evening when children from the town visited. The children could read stories aloud, allowing the spirits to participate vicariously in the liveliness and imagination children's tales brought about. What seemed like a haunting was just an echo of the past, not eerie or fearful, but simply longing companionship and the joyous flight of fantasy that only stories could provide. The library remained open, and the haunting transformed into a cherished cohabitation, an example of the living and the beyond existing in a beautiful, shared space. After successfully navigating the complexities of the library haunting, Nina was approached by a forward-thinking technology company in the city. The company had been experiencing bizarre incidents in their main office, computers fired up of their own volition, with code appearing on screens in languages the developers claimed they'd never seen before. As often occurs in these situations, a few employees alleged they had seen an apparition wandering the halls late at night. The company, progressive and open-minded in their thinking, didn't dismiss these incidents as mere glitches or imagination. Instead, they contacted Nina. Entering the glass and steel edifice, a contrast to the usual old buildings she was called to, was a new experience for Nina. Right from the start, she recognized that this case would demand a completely different approach. Eliza, too, sensed a different kind of energy in the sleek, modern environment, complex, and entwined with the tech that abounded everywhere. Their investigative path led them through corridors filled with cutting-edge technologies. However, it was in a forgotten corner of the building that they found their first lead, an abandoned workspace that held the remnants of the company's first steps into technological innovation, now dust-covered and obsolete. The workspace was home to an old server that had once supported the company's nascent operations and was no longer in active use. The air around it buzzed with an intangible energy, a rich amalgamation of the building's modern vibe and a memory rooted in the past. This intensified when Nina learned about Anthony, a brilliant coder and one of the company's first employees who had worked tirelessly on this very server before tragically losing his life to a sudden illness. Emboldened by this discovery, Nina proposed an unconventional séance in the heart of this high-tech world, a digital séance comprising a unique code, a fusion of the arcane and the cybernetic, a bridge between spirit and software. A skilled developer at the company adapted Nina's notes and instructions into a temporary interface, which was then connected to the old server. The séance was a mesmerizing display of the harmonious amalgamation of the infallible mystic and the ceaseless innovation of human intelligence. As Anthony's spirit was coaxed to interact, code flowed across screens, a voice from the afterlife communicated through the language of technology. He spoke of his unfinished work, the ideas he had conceived, but hadn't been able to manifest in code. Moved by the spectral coder's passion, the company worked to decipher and complete Anthony's unfinished work, integrating his visionary concepts into their new projects. Meanwhile, Nina advised the employees to remember Anthony, celebrate him and his contributions, and make space for him within the building where his thoughts and ideas still resonated. With her ever-growing reputation as the bridge between the seen and unseen, Nina found her life swathed in the extraordinary. Yet, amidst the whirlwind of spectral communications, unexplained phenomena, and the endless flux of curious onlookers, there was one constant: the house. The house that had drawn her into the world of the spiritual, the house that had become her sanctuary amidst the chaos of her newfound calling. The house, however, was not as tranquil as it had once been. Nina felt a strange agitation in its atmosphere, a sense of longing, of something left unresolved. Even Eliza, now so used to glitches in the fabric of reality, noticed a wobble in the house's energy field. It was as if the house itself was urging them towards something, a mystery begging to be solved. As Nina and Eliza embarked on a thorough exploration of the old structure, they stumbled upon a sealed space hidden under the staircase, an untouched vault full of treasures and mementos of the dwelling's past inhabitants. It was a time capsule of countless lives and their myriad stories, each waiting for someone to listen once more. The most prominent artifact among the memorabilia was an expansive family portrait, showing a grand gathering of individuals that spanned generations. Among them was a young woman who bore a striking resemblance to Nina, a detail that echoed in both their hearts. The name at the bottom was inscribed as Lillian, the house's original owner, who, from town legends, was the first woman known for her spiritual activities in the town. Embracing this discovery, Nina decided it was time to bring peace to the house, as she had so many other spaces. Unlike other seances centered around specific spirits, Nina and Eliza decided to pay a tribute to all the souls tied to their house. They opened the house to the community, inviting everyone who had been touched by the spiritual events in their town to join a grand seance. Together, they called upon the spirits, acknowledged their stories, and thanked them for their presence. As the seance went on, the air in the room grew lighter, gradually filled with a deep sense of peace. Even the ever-present shadows of the house seemed to retreat to a respectful distance, matching the newfound tranquility within the house. With the final words spoken and candles blown out, the house returned to hush, its echoing silence now comforting rather than unsettling. From there on, Nina continued her journey, her paranormal consultations growing nationwide, always with the secure knowledge that her home was not merely a fortress against the unknown, but an ally and friend.